Okay, thanks for pulling yourself out of bed. Appreciate that, honestly, and thanks for being here. I'm going to let Carolyn introduce Josh in a little while, and when it's his turn, we're probably all going to go climb up into the sound booth there, just so we can let him be hands-on and talk to us from there. But I wanted to ask for permission to just share a few things before we get going today. As I already have, let me say again, thank you for not just being here this morning. Most of you have taken opportunity to jump into that booth from time to time, either to do the sound or to run the video projection, and it's been helpful. But I also know that there have been occasions when you've had to jump in there and you didn't necessarily know everything that was going on. It's largely intuitive, and you can sort of hack your way through. But the point of being here today is so that we begin to move beyond hacking our way through. There are a couple things, three things that I wanted to share with you before I head off this morning. Number one is that you may not realize it, but when you are in that booth back there, you are the most powerful people in the room, period. You have the power to be invisible and therefore to make all of the plans and preparations that have gone into guiding God's people into worship just go smoothly. You have the power to totally screw it up. And that can happen in... No, sorry, I'm trying to go back and forth. Here, I'll go over here, then I'll be...
Oh, great.
I'll tell you one time when I was maybe 18 years old, doing the sound. We didn't have any projection at that point in my church. It was way up. We had a building shaped like this, but at the back there was a balcony that was not deployed for seating, and so we'd had the sound booth and stuff set up there. And I remember this day with humor and pain, because I was the worship was done and the pastor was going, or Pastor John. Oh my goodness! And I had my elbows on the soundboard, and I fell asleep. And I fell asleep like this, and I awoke to a thunderous feedback that took me, felt like forever. It was probably over like a half a second, but it felt like forever to try to figure out where am I, and what's that sound, and how did somebody stop it? Oh, that's me. Which one is it? Now, it happened quickly, but it was incredibly embarrassing, and it totally messed up the flow of the preacher, and of course half the people in the congregation are going like this, and that was all on me. But feedback is much more subtle than that. Usually, if you are tuned in, you can hear it building from a mile away. But oftentimes, just because you're not tuned in, it gets to the point where maybe others are hearing it before you do. And then you have to go through that process, okay, which one is it, where is it, find a way that's Josh's thing. My point, though, in this is that it is incredibly, incredibly important that you be attentive from the time you walk in there to the time you go out. And, not to embarrass anybody, but you know that I've, got on a couple of you guys from time to time because, you're friends and you kind of got into a bit of a conversation, and then a cue got missed or a noise got missed or something like that. The problem is that oftentimes I'm at the front, you're at the back. 95% of the people in the building aren't looking at you, but I am. And I can see that you are distracted chatting with someone around you. It's just so important that you know that when the time you walk in that booth, or the time you leave, you're on the job. And to that end, I want to say this. If you were invited to play an instrument, guitar, drums, keyboard, whatever, or sing, you would be focused. As a musician, you would be certainly focused on your own playing, making sure that you are playing well. But whoever is the identified worship leader, you'd have at least one half of an eye on them at all times, because they can do all kinds of weird things. They may want to slow the song down. They may want to really pick it up. They may want to sing a cappella and stop everybody from playing instruments altogether, because you know that you're part of the band, and if you start, off on some sort of Led Zeppelin solo somewhere on your guitar in the middle of a quiet worship song, that's not going to be appropriate. You're tuned into the worship leader. I need for you to think that you're part of the band, that you're part of the worship team, not just accessories at the back running a sound system. And that means that it is critical for you to be tuned in and watching the worship leader. I'm going to tell you about something that happens way too often for us. Way too often. So the song is playing beautifully. The sound is a good blend for the vocals and the musicians. Congregations merrily singing. But we get to maybe an interlude in the song, and Pastor Carolyn or whoever is leading the worship aside, it feels like they just want to prompt or say something about the mood or something that the song is saying about maybe just how the Spirit is leading them at that time. Far too often, whoever's at the back is not paying attention, and we miss the first sentence of what Pastor Carolyn is saying, because the mic's not been turned up enough for her to hear. Yeah, you brought her down maybe so she wasn't overwhelming during the singing, but now she's talking and we need to hear her. The whole band caught it, because she's been able to send signals to them that you're just going to talk here. Her body language is as she stepped closer to the microphone. Everything, if you've been paying attention to her, says that girl's about to speak. And so I expect if you're on the board to have your hand ready to catch the very first word that she speaks when she's not singing. So that's all about being attentive. That's about a mind that says, I'm part of the band. I'm part of the team that is doing that. Okay? So that's just one thing that I really wanted to emphasize for you. I hope that's consistent with your philosophy, John. That we're all on the team. And if when somebody makes a mistake, we feel it. And mistakes happen. That's not the deal, right? Okay. It just can't happen routinely. Not when you have the power and the ability to not do it. So when you get in there, you're on the job. Unless your friend has another job in the booth, kick them out. Don't let them sit back there with you, because there will be a point of distraction. One practical suggestion, and I may have a conflict here, but I'm going to say it to you, and that is this. You are mixing for a worship service, not a concert. And that means a very different sound. You do want for the congregants, the people who are gathered, to be able to hear themselves sing. But there's a unique balance that has to happen for me to know what I'm supposed to sing. It goes like this. Once upon a time, if I were to pull out a majority of the songs that are in a hymn, if I had Pastor Carolyn go and just play it at the piano right now, you would need no one to sing with you to be able to hear the melody. It's right there in the right hand, and it would be there for you to follow. If you started singing, you'd be able to follow along with the melody. That's just the nature of how that music was composed and orchestrated. When we moved into the era of newer worship styles that had kind of a pop music feel to it, the majority of it, if you take away the person singing, you probably won't even be able to find the melody. It's supported by chords, it's supported by chording that doesn't allow the voice. The voice in these songs is the melody. And that means that if I'm sitting here, I have to be able to hear Carolyn or whoever has the lead.
I won't know how the song goes unless I've heard it 1,000 times. If I've never heard the song before, I will never know how the song goes if I can't hear her. To that end, here's my request. Here's where I may run into conflict because I have run into another sound person about this before. I have an experienced sound person who said to me quite proudly once, when I'm in that booth, I don't sing. I want to just listen to what's going on. I don't sing. Here's the deal. If you don't sing, you don't hear what the congregation's hearing. Now, you can't sing all the time. You can't. You mostly got to follow the direction of my other friend. But occasionally during your mix, I want to sing because your voice is loud when you're this close to it. And if you find that you can no longer hear the worship leader when you start singing, then the same thing has happened. If I'm out here singing, I can't hear them either, and now I don't know where to go again. So there is necessity that you are a worshiper, even as you're running the machine. You would never expect our worship team at the front to not worship as they lead us. So you need to worship while you're in the back there. And my practical suggestion is take a few occasions where you actually sing so you can, in a sense, hear what I'd be hearing if I was sitting here and singing. I don't know if that's a point of conflict or not, but
I like that because I grew up in a family always sang anyway. So when I'm in the booth, I'm not singing a lot of the time because I have to hear what's going on. But for me, it's partly keeps me engaged in what's going on too. I feel more focused as part of the group when I'm at least humming along, if not singing. It keeps me in tune with what's happening too. So I like that.
okay, good, thanks. So my point in that is that actually it's a goal so that you can hear what this person is hearing, because that's who you're mixing for. And there's one other part that I just wanted to share with you today, and it's kind of funny. I brought the little black book. I hardly ever pull a little black book out, the manual of the Church of the Nazarene. We have a section at the front of the manual that the heading for it is the covenant of Christian conduct, and the subheading is Christian life. And in it, there's this attempt to try to give some direction about some of the things that we would be wise to include in our life practice, or some things that maybe be wise for us to avoid. So we have a position on alcohol that has discouraged its use, and so that's where this would be said. We actually have had for a long time a statement on the entertainment industry. And for many, many years, it's funny to look back at it now from our perspective, but it was basically run, don't participate in it, don't go to movies, don't do that, just flee from that stuff. But as the years unfold and every one of us has the entertainment industry in our pocket, we realize that that's kind of a silly position to try to tell people to just close their eyes and stay away. But, and so the statement has changed, and I want to read it to you as something of a challenge. I'm going to jump into it kind of in the middle of it. It says, because we're living in a day of great moral confusion in which we face the potential encroachment of the evils of the day into the sacred precincts of our homes through various avenues, such as current literature, radio, television, computers, internet, it's essential that the most rigorous safeguards be observed to keep our homes from becoming secularized and worldly. Now listen to this. However, the hope entertainment that endorses, encourages holy living, affirms scriptural values, supports the sacredness of the marriage and the exclusivity of the marriage covenant, these should be affirmed and encouraged. Now here, we especially encourage our young people to use their gifts in media and the arts to influence positively this pervasive part of our culture. In other words, media it's everywhere. And you have the opportunity to not just simply make it sort of this benign exercise in your life, but to influence it so that it accomplishes positive, good things, if not godly things, positive things. And this idea that we especially encourage our young people to do this speaks to the notion of calling. Oftentimes when we talk about calling, we're thinking about a pastor or a preacher or whatever, missionary. I would invite you to consider whether using your aptitude, your skills to do this kind of stuff can actually be a calling upon your life, and to use this in ways that make a difference for the kingdom of God. I have a feeling that our presenter today would be comfortable with the notion that he's been called to do this, and I want to put that out at you today as well. That maybe this is not just a job that you do. Maybe this is something that you do for the honor of God, and that you would take your willingness and your skills and do some extraordinary things through your willingness. All right, bless you. Thanks for giving me a few minutes to get us going this morning. And Karen, you want to introduce Josh, or?
Sure, since he's been this morning. No, Denise connected Josh and I, and from what I've learned from Denise is that Josh actually started doing this at a church like you guys are doing now, and then developed some skills and has traveled the world on cruise ships, and now has kind of settled down in Toronto doing this. And so we've asked him to come specifically to teach about using the soundboard and mixing that. After he shared his part, I am going to do a little bit on the Easy Worship presentation on the computer part. But for right now, we're going to listen to Josh, and he's going to share his expertise and what he's learned and teach us more about using the soundboard. So take it over. If you want us up there, we can go up there.
I guess we might as well head up to the back.
Okay.
Sound good? Make it sound not so good. So it's really cool that it's neat. I kind of like that sometimes you're in the back. I don't like being in the front that much. I'd rather be in the back. But you get to quietly sit back here, and no one even really realizes you're here half the time, but you have a lot of control over what goes on. Crazy board in front of you. But, so for you guys, I like to work with the group when they first come in and find out, well, we work with the worship leader, find out what they're doing, what they want to do for the day, kind of what they want to accomplish. That's why it's really important to, during the practice as well, to be alert of what's going on. You'll miss a lot if you're not paying too much attention. You want to know what's coming out and have an idea what songs there are, different songs, and different parts. It's like, if you listen to the song, some songs, you might be a really cool piano part that just so beautiful, it really adds to it, but if it's, you need to make sure different elements can be heard, I guess. You want to be able to hear everything, but not at the right volume, but you want to be able to hear everything without something getting missed, especially the vocal. The vocal kind of leads everything. It leads you into the song mostly, and understanding the lyrics and following the melody, like you said. Different people mix differently, but for me, I always like the vocals to be very much sort of the main focus of the mix. Everything else has to be there too. But, so when I'm mixing, usually I like say this is the vocal. I want to know exactly where my vocal is at all times. So even if my hand isn't on the board, then at least if the vocal starts to speak or they're doing something I really want to be heard, I want to be able to reach forward right away and get it. One thing I sometimes do, I'll actually put like a little piece of tape in front of it, so you can quickly glance and go, oh, that's a vocal. That tends to be also what feeds back the easiest. So I find that really helpful for me. I guess one big thing, you want everything to sound as natural as possible, which is sometimes challenging. It would be nice if you could just put a mic and they sound perfect right away, but it doesn't always work that way. So that gets you into using your EQ and adjusting things. So this whole section of the board, your blue knobs, they're all for adjusting how it sounds. Your volume is down here, but your blue knobs all affect sort of how
Want to sample it?
That sounds good, actually. That'd be handy. Yeah, if you're talking or singing into a mic there.
Piano number 2.
Sure.
Should be, yep. That should be 2.
I think that's going to be number 2, yeah. So I will just merrily talk away. You can do whatever you want to do with my voice. And be an opportunity right now to espouse the greatness of some of the Vancouver Canucks' new rookie sensation, Elias Pettersson.
Will affect.
He is 19 years old, and season he was able to set all-time records in the Swedish Elite League for goals, assists, for total points. The only one player in league history had more, and that was a fellow named Kent Nielsen. Kent Nielsen played in an era back when Wayne Gretzky was getting 250 points in the NHL, and nobody even comes close to half of that anymore, so it's a much higher production
These
time.
ones are a bit different.
But just to put it in the
See, it's got
context,
the line.
Patterson's
So these
point
two all work
production
together.
exceeded
These
that
two always work together.
of Peter
This one's
Forsberg,
the
of Marcus
line.
Naslund,
Yeah.
of the Sedins.
This one,
He, in fact,
choose
essentially is the most prolific point producer in Swedish Elite League hockey, and is a 19-year-old. That is crazy nuts, as a matter of fact. And he ended up being the league MVP, the rookie of the year, the forward of the year, and here I come. I could switch over to Kermit the Frog at this time if you want. I was thinking that today would be a good day to impersonate your favorite frog, but perhaps I could
probably
not.
about 1 kilometer.
Oh, here comes the storm. Sounded like, yeah, that's good. That's really natural sounding. I'm glad for that one. That's going to make sure everybody's happy on a Sunday morning. But,
See what I'm doing on the bottom knob is that's
we'll just keep
how much
making
you turn
noises
up
at
or
the
down
front here
of
because
the
I hope
frequency.
I'm being useful to the rest of
So
you
in that case, I
for
just turn it
trying to understand how EQ, or also known as equalizing settings,
As I
work.
turn higher, that's
This
just
is,
a higher
this
frequency.
is a lot of fun now, actually. I'm glad that you're going through this exercise. And I hope that my words are not being a point of distraction for all of you. Maybe that's some jokes that I can offer up to you.
Okay, that's good for now.
I just want to tell a joke.
We'll cut you off before the jokes start. So it just shows you have a lot of control over exactly how it sounds. But a lot of people have no idea how to use this. It's always there, but people are like, okay, I'm afraid to touch that. Fine, I'll do this. So this part takes a lot of practice and getting used to what it sounds like. If you have chances to do stuff like that, where it's hard to make too many crazy changes while they're trying to practice, like it's distracting. But even if you're out, like, one way you can even learn too is you can say if you come in sometime, if you're able to plug in your phone and even just play music through the system, you can still make all the same changes if you're playing music in the system. That's maybe a good way to learn what it sounds like.
Welcome to practice any time. Right? We're going to get that set up. Just get a feel for what that board does. Absolutely.
Yeah, let's say if you have music going through the channel, you can still do all the same things to adjust it. And over time you can learn. It's developing your ear where once you get good at it, you can hear something and go, oh, I think it needs to be turned down a little bit right here, and then you might be able to dial it pretty quickly to where you want to. But what I was doing there is a good way to find it. Usually you just have to you can just say, oh, I need to turn it down 3 kilohertz. So what you would do in that case, you could turn it up, that frequency up a little bit, and then this allows you to, it's sort of looking through the frequency, through the low frequency or high frequency, and you can hear how it's affecting it. Sometimes what I like to do is, like, say we had started out and it was sounding like Kermit the Frog. Didn't sound so good. Sometimes I'll turn it up and then move this around until I find the bad frequency. It's like, okay, now it's even worse than it was before. So say he's talking and then I'm searching and I find, oh, that sounds the worst. So that's probably the worst part. Then I can turn that frequency down. It takes time to get used to, but I would definitely suggest coming in and even just messing around. Getting used to these buttons in here, these are the most important ones. Getting used to these while you're even just playing music is really helpful. Also, in the morning, like when you're doing your rehearsals, you're practicing, paying attention to what stuff is close to the point of feedback, because of course no one wants feedback. If you are already aware that one microphone is close to feedback, then you can either pull it back so it's at a safe point, it's not going to feedback, or at least if you start to get a little bit of feedback, you know, oh, it's probably vocal. So you can adjust it quickly, because that's the worst feeling when you have 5 or 6 channels open and then you have some feedback, you have no idea which one, you're just like, turn the master down. It's really hard sometimes. So you want to pay attention as you're setting it up, as you're doing it, to figure out kind of which ones are sort of at potential to have problems or to start feeding back. Trying to think. Do you guys use monitors here at all, or is it?
Sometimes, yeah, we do. Lately, we have been quite routinely. We actually have kind of a rudimentary setup in here to try to reinforce the sound going into here, but it's probably during the service time itself, it's more of a nuisance because it's not giving you an accurate sound of what's going on. So when we get to the preaching, we try to turn that up a little bit, and then that sound gets reinforced. But Carolyn, you're using some monitoring these days, yeah?
We are trying to use a monitor on the platform.
Okay.
Trying. Yeah, that could be a challenge. On the board, do you know which one is sending to the monitor?
Is it number 1?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So,
Yeah.
so here, Johnny takes the camera.
It's probably one of these first two then.
Yeah, I think so. So I think we typically use. Where's my monitors? Yeah,
These are all.
yeah, these are them here,
sends.
and then they go through the sub mixer, the sub master
Okay.
here.
Makes sense. Oh, that's nice, yeah. Camera monitors. So when you're sending things to a monitor, say auxiliary 1, up to this top one.
Do you want to, Josh? Why don't you just back up a step and explain to these guys what a monitor is and what its purpose is?
Yeah, for sure. So the monitor, usually, like if it's up on stage, it allows whoever's on stage to be able to hear themselves a bit.
It's actually its own speaker. So just like this one that's down here, it's usually at the front, actually facing the musician as opposed to facing out to the crowd. So the congregation hears through the main speaker, but the monitor is for the presenter to monitor what's coming out of him and them.
Yeah, you've got it up front there. So in this
Et
case,
voila. Yeah.
it's sitting there right there by the singers. The singers tend to be who need the most to hear themselves. It's sometimes difficult because when you're standing on stage, you don't hear what's coming from the main speaker that well. You'll hear it in the room, but it's hard to hear yourself very well.
Have you ever been on a bus and somebody had their headset on their ears and they're singing along, and it was awful? It's because they can't hear their own voice. They're just singing oblivious to what's going on, and if you can't hear your own voice, it's hard to stay on tune.
Yeah. So when you're singing, it's so much easier when you can hear yourself. It allows you to get your pitch in the right spot. You're not going off key or anything. So sometimes we can do like a monitor in the front. And that has its own challenges because you're also in control of the house sound, what's in the room, and you're also in control of what goes through the monitor, allowing them to hear themselves well. And that involves, you can't hear what's going on up there as much. I would encourage you to walk up at different points and hear what's going on in the monitor and be like, I hear piano, I don't hear this. But from back here, we can't really hear what's going in the monitor too much.
Would you say that the monitors are mostly going to get set during the rehearsal time ahead?
Yeah, the monitor generally you would try to have that set ahead of time in the rehearsal, working with the musicians and singers, and then once the service is running, you probably won't change it after that point, because they were already at that point they're relying on it to be at a certain volume. If it changes too much, then it'll throw them off a bit too. So that's something you want to work on during practice, and that involves sort of some back and forth with the singers. So you'll talk to the singers, you say, oh, can you hear yourself well enough? Oh, they want a little bit more in the monitors, you might give them a little bit more, a little bit less. And in the monitor, you have control of exactly what goes there as well. So each of your channels here, it's like one might be for vocal, or for the one mic, a different mic. Say this might be drums. Each one is for something different on stage, right? So when you follow, say, mic one, you follow mic one up. If your monitor is plugged in, so it goes through aux1, so this is aux1, aux2, aux3, and aux4. Each of these would correspond to a different output, either a monitor or different things. Like camera 1 would be a different one. Say the stage 1 is aux1, that means all of these top gray ones are what is being sent to stage monitor on the front. So if you wanted more of input 2 like we did, you would follow it up and go, okay, that's 1, and if 1 is sending to the stage, turning this up would be adjusting what you send to your monitor in the front. And this different channel, you do the same thing, more, less, off completely. So that's, if you're not used to doing it, it takes time. Again, we can't hear it here. You have to work with the singer and say, or whoever's standing by the monitor, and say, what do you want? Do you want drums? Do you want piano? So you have to work with them to find out what they want. What else was I going to say? That's my train of thought. Creating the blend is something challenging, to have everything sound like it all blends together. You're not hearing only drums and then it's like drowning everything else out. But part of that comes from, if you listen to music, sometimes it's interesting to listen to music and go sort of analyze it and go, oh, how is it balanced? You can hear different instruments, you can hear drums, you can hear the guitar, you can hear all different parts. And what I like to do when I'm running sound for a service is sometimes you get distracted just with the overall sound. It sounds good, you forget to listen to the individual instruments. Sometimes I find for me helpful, as I'm running, I'll go, okay, wait, I'll listen for the piano, okay, I can hear it, it's good. And then I'll look on stage, I'm like, okay, what's the next thing? There's drums there, can I hear the drums? And I listen to the next, oh, there's the drums, I can hear it well. Oh, there's a guitar player, can I hear him? Oh, where is it? Can't hear it that well. Okay, I'll turn back a little bit. So, if you're listening to the whole mix, sometimes you might forget about one or two elements and they might get missed in the mix. So I find it helpful for me. I'm always sort of going one by one per person on stage, going, okay, they sound good, oh, they can use a bit more, or oh, that was a little too loud, we'll just sort of bring them back a little bit. And that's kind of like a constant thing, because sometimes they'll get too loud, sometimes they get too quiet. Any questions on anything on the board? There's a lot of buttons. Have you guys all been running sound a little bit, or not a lot?
Rookies, you got some white rookies there.
I'm the only
So it might actually be useful, Josh, to go again how, although it looks like there's 1,000 buttons here, there really
Still
is.
look 1,000
That
buttons.
these
Yeah, break
correspond
down
with
by
that,
section.
and just
Yeah,
every time
when
I
you
can go
first
from
look
mic
at
to
a
mic
board
if
like
you want.
this,
Mhm.
it looks confusing. It just looks like 100 buttons and there's a lot going on. It's really not nearly as complicated as it looks. every strip, like say 8 going up here, this, if you understand this, then you understand all of this. Because, let's start with 1. So this is all corresponding to whatever's plugged into 1.
So I'm at number 1 right now.
Sure.
This should be the main pulpit. It's always been set up on since forever. You can actually hear a bit of a tin can kind of sound there, so you may want to play with the EQ even while I'm sitting here talking. Or with some feedback.
A little feedback. So that you can hear it humming. He's humming, but you can also hear it humming a bit on top. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to turn it up.
Welcome
Alright.
to the scary house of church. So this is number 1.
So it's feeding back.
And most of the time when I'm preaching, I actually go to a wireless lavalier, but this is the main speaking point, and there he is. You can see it's cleaning up my voice right there. There's no more feedback. That was totally within his power and control to do that. Bottom line, of course, is that that means that really we don't ever want to have that booming sound, that feedback sound. And ultimately, so it just sounds like I'm talking straight into your ear and not through a microphone and a speaker. Should I keep talking, or am I good?
You're okay right now, I guess.
Okay. And you had number 2 before.
Yep.
What's this one here?
It's on mute.
Very good.
So there's number 2, and then if I move from mic to mic, each column, I'll have a different one.
Makes sense. 2, 3, 4. So yeah, when you're first learning, you want to learn what one line in a row does, because that's, if you know this, then you can learn the rest of this pretty easy. So I'll go through just one of these rows anyway. When you're setting the volume, there's 2 different things to set the volume with. You have gain up here, which usually once you get in place, you'll kind of leave it in place. And you have your fader, they call the fader, which is what you would normally do to mix, turning up and down. Once you're running, you generally just do everything on the faders. So, like if I bring that one up, I can keep going. There's the feedback. Alright, I'm going to bring it back just a little bit. Alright, stop the humming for a second. So I've got it, it starts to feedback. So right around it. So I'm going to bring it back a little bit before the feedback. And one way you can try to find the feedback, you have to be careful what you're doing because you don't want to go too much feedback at once. If you turn up, let me start a different frequency. If you're turning, so remember these 2 are always linked together. This one chooses the frequency, the top one, and the bottom one turns that particular frequency up or down. So if I start, I'm going to turn it up just by, and you can, so I've turned it up a little bit, maybe 5 dB, and this allows you to look for the frequency. In that case, it started feeding back particularly right around there, 200 hertz. So now that I found sort of a bad frequency, I can turn that frequency down a little bit, and now it won't hum at that frequency nearly as much. You want to talk a little bit again?
I will talk a little bit again. Sounds like we have some pretty good.
So it's not feeding back at that frequency,
and
it's still a little bit on a high frequency.
I kind of like the boomy sound of my voice to a certain degree. It gives me a sense of power and authority. But as a side comment, every once in a while you're going to hear a whistle and you'll go crazy trying to find out what it is, only to discover that it's somebody's hearing aid whistling 3 feet away from you. You have no power over that one, I'm afraid.
So the feedback's an interesting one. Actually, let me try a different way to show you guys as well. So if it's, you don't have to be afraid of feedback. It's useful, but you don't want it to get out of control. So like there, I'm maintaining. It's feeding back, but it's just slightly. You're not letting it get out of control. My finger always stays on the button because you don't want it to go crazy. Then what I often do to find the feedback is I'll go just below where it's feeding back, so it's not really feeding back there too much. I'll turn up.
Didn't know I could whistle that well.
And actually that's already right on the correct frequency, 3K. So that's just with guard the frequency there. Slightly. Just when he whistles now.
We should probably walk through this sometime, go through every single microphone. Try
Yeah.
and flatten out the curve.
Found that one.
And you found it,
Yep.
and it's
That
gone, just
That
like
should be
that.
pretty good now. Want to talk again a little bit?
I'm going to talk again a little bit. So we have still a fair bit of...
Yeah, we can go back to the joke now.
Yeah. After Josh has done everything, the wild card, of course, is that I'm looking out at a whole bunch of hard pieces of wood. And on Sunday, when there's 70 or 80 people here, bodies are wonderful sound suckers. And all of a sudden, the sound mix that you had in an empty room is a wee bit different when you've got all those people who are sucking up, especially all the low frequencies.
Yeah, it makes a big difference again once people are in the room. You'll hear a little bit of a difference in how it sounds. It tends to, like when the room's empty, you get a little more of the higher frequencies bouncing around in the room. But when people are in the room, they sort of absorb some of that sound. So it sounds, I don't know, a little warmer, a little less bright. Which is okay, but sometimes you might have to compensate a little bit. But that's sounding pretty good on his podium mic at the moment. But sometimes you have to do that. You have to sort of mess around a little bit until you find where it's really bad and then go, oh, that's the worst part. Let's turn it back a little bit.
And some people have voices. I've been told that my voice is a little bit hard to EQ. I don't know if that's the truth or not, but that's what I've been told.
Yeah, it depends a lot. Some vocals are harder than others. When you get something to feedback is when you're pushing it to the highest volume you can do in the room without it feedback on speakers. So when you have someone who's singing really loudly or speaks loudly and really projects, it's easier because you don't have to give them as much volume in the mic. So they don't really get to that point of feedback. When someone's speaking quietly or they're singing quietly, then you have to push the volumes a bit more. And from a sound perspective, that can be more challenging. Nothing wrong with that. Sometimes some of the best singers sing very quietly, but it makes it more challenging for the sound guy. When I was on the ship, I was working with 4 singers that were on the ship all the time. 3 of them had really strong vocals, and the other one had a really sweet voice, but her voice was very quiet. So it was always a challenge to try to make sure she could be heard above the others and make sure she wasn't feeding back. So it can be a challenge, but it's a fun challenge. I don't know, I love the feeling of being back here and you've got your mix going, you can hear everything, you're at a point where you're happy with how it sounds. But yeah, it's never something you just set and then it's set to go. It's one of those things you're always paying attention, what's happening in the service, and how it's going. And, yeah, it's really an ongoing thing and you're really a big part of the show. So now that we talked about everything along that channel, it's the same thing along here too. So same thing, all of these ones here adjust how it sounds with the frequencies. These ones adjust, so where we go from one, very good. And that's your volume for going to the room. That covers some of the main basics. And so suddenly, instead of having 100 buttons, it's just 20 buttons.
You want to see if one of them can sort out the sound on a second mic or something like that?
Yeah, sure. Who else do I want to do, Jen?
One different voice, why don't you use Gerald's voice?
I
Yeah,
know
go for
the
it.
basics already, but you just, I don't want to do that, except for you just taught me.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Go for it. Sit down a little bit.
Jeffrey! Yeah. Come play drums.
Do you want to try a mix with drums and voice?
Who turns drums?
That'd be good.
It's always switching around. It used to be just, this is, and then switch to this, and then switch to colors. It's confusing.
Yeah.
I'll do it after.
Sounds good.
Do it. Usually for
This is like the
I
first
usually do that, the slides.
Yeah.
And some
You
parts
know
are
which
sounds.
channels? Jeffrey?
You just
Yeah.
sound
What channel your drums are? Okay.
Which one is that? Oh, that one.
So I can see it a little bit.
So the piano, we do not have support of it, just.
Yeah.
And actually, we usually have a.
Sure, that's the one, yeah, right.
We usually have a piano up on
Did you say drums? Yes. Didn't you say that feedback just a zero?
It depends. So that, I guess I never got to that part. The two volume places is here. And this also
Sorry.
controls volume up here. So, here, do you want to talk in that mic for a moment?
Yeah, I can talk into this microphone.
So see at the top
Sometimes I just
here,
hit keyboards.
that also does volume.
And I see.
So where it feeds back depends on how that's set. If you have that set all the way up, then you'll get feedback a lot lower down.
And bring it on over.
So then you start getting feedback. Where is the point there? Where it's
It's
a
picking up lots of juice.
So it depends there. On the board, I usually like to try to have my faders around the 0 mark. That's just what ends up sounding the best. So I'll usually set it to 0 and then adjust this to close to where it would need to be. But really, once these are set, you can probably leave these in place. That's probably pretty close there.
We're good? We're good?
Sure.
Alrighty. Jeff has another microphone, which should be number 3, I think.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, and we'll get some harmonies going eventually. Here's the mix.
Check us out.
Sure. And then number 4.
It's morning still.
That's okay, I got everybody.
Oh.
I might, there we go. I go through. What are we singing? Mary had a little lamb. No, okay.
Okay, you guys want to leave You Are Holy?
Sure.
You know the words of that?
I'm not alive.
Yeah, you have the words, so it's fine.
You are holy.
You are holy.
You are mighty.
You are mighty.
You are worthy.
You are worthy.
Worthy of praise. I will follow. I will listen. I will love you all of my days. And I will sing to and worship the King who is worthy. And I will love and adore him. I will bow down before him. I will sing to and worship the King who is worthy. And I will love and adore him. I will bow down before him. You're my Prince of Peace, and I will live my life for you. We can keep going.
Sounds good. So pause a second, I'll talk for a little bit. So what I was noticing at first we could hear her, but then when she was singing harmonies, she almost got drowned out because the guys are singing pretty strong. So in that case, I brought the two guys back a little bit, because when they got in the chorus, they were singing pretty strong. I brought them back a little bit, and I still had some volume available, so I turned her up a little bit so then you could still hear all three of them at once. So it's paying attention, not just the instruments, but going, oh, can I hear her? Yep, okay, can I hear him? Oh, you gotta check each one and kind of mentally go through each person on the stage at once, or one at a time, I mean. The one on drums, what's his name?
That's Jeff.
Jeff? Nice. You want to play a little bit more again?
Yeah, sure.
Same one or you want?
It's up to you guys. You can play same or different.
I'm gonna do something softer.
Do the one Johnny likes, the name one.
What's that?
Do the one that Johnny likes, the Who You Say I Am. That one.
Oh, okay. I learned that yesterday.
Give him the challenge.
Yeah.
Oh, I already know yet, so that's that way we can learn it.
I can't sing
No.
I don't have the music, so I don't know what's happening.
So
especially Father and Son, it's very hard to hear. Their voices are very similar. I'm like, wait.
You sit both beside each other, so you have to go like this, trying to figure out who's doing it.
Anyways, yeah. One thing that I see you guys don't have connected at this point at least, which I like to use a lot, is you can plug headphones into the board. And
There's some right there.
yeah, so if you're plugged in with headphones, then you can use this little button here, the PFL button, and that'll allow you to listen to just that channel, which is super helpful because sometimes you might, if there's a couple singers, or sometimes I've been on events where it's like 2 or 3 acoustic guitar players, and it's really hard to know which one's which. You're like,
And you can figure out which one's that.
so then you can go, okay, let me listen. You can hear each channel like on its own in your headphones, which is really helpful. So in that case, rather than having to actually make the change in the room, I can just listen to one at a time and go, oh, that's what he sounds like. Yeah, it's fun.
Would you suggest mixing with headphones on or headphones off?
I would mostly do it with the headphones off when you're actually mixing, like doing the actual mix. Although it is useful to reference it. Usually I would mix with mostly just the room 95% of the time. It is useful though once in a while. If you're not pushing any of these buttons and you have all of them, like, if it's lit up, it's on. If none of them are lit up, then you're hearing the mix of everything at once. And that can be useful too, because sometimes you can hear what's going on easier in your headphones than you can for the whole room. So it's useful it helps you understand sort of the balance between things. But for the most part, it's hard to actually mix the room when you're using headphones. Plus, if you start to get feedback, you might not notice it for a second or two in the headphones. So it's useful as a reference point, but most of the time then you're doing the actual mix, listening to what's going on in the room. And I'd like a suggestion too of sort of singing along a little bit too. Helps you realize, oh, can I still hear the melody when I'm singing? Stuff like that. Anyone else wanna try?
Don't give your nose on.
You got this. I'll start.
Maybe you should take turns on it.
Yeah, we're just gonna switch up
Jump in
now.
the chair and take control. Who's not out of
What's the
turn?
word? So I left them up a little bit before they're up as
Well, he looks so tired.
It's early in the morning on the weekend for you guys, eh? 10 o'clock.
I usually get up like between 6 to 8.
I'll make my words.
I got up at 8 o'clock, stayed at 9 until 9:30.
What time did you go to bed last night?
Somebody knows the words.
I fell asleep right when I was like, I legit fell asleep when I woke up at 5 o'clock this
Thank
voice back just to hear it. The harmony sounds great, but you want to be able to hear the melody more than we're ruminating on it. Oh, that sounds really good. You might have seen I pushed a few buttons at the top.
Yeah.
These buttons here, you won't have to worry about them too much. This just turns down, that's what they call a high pass filter. It turns down everything below a certain frequency, so the really low frequencies. And because these are vocal mics, there's not going to be much happening below those frequencies anyway. The voice, there isn't, doesn't go that low. It's more of like a bass guitar or something. The vocals don't use those
So
frequencies
we
too
don't
much.
have to worry about
Not too much, yeah.
Please add commentary that says.
If we were to add something like a string instrument, how much does that actually change how you mix?
Like to add an instrument into the...
No, like for example, because this is all like just vocals for the most part, and then electronic drum kit. But if you had like an acoustic guitar or like electric guitar, would that is there a different approach to that?
Not a lot. Everybody has their own style. Some people like to get the drums first and then add in instruments. I used to do that. I tend to just sort of put everything up now and then make sure that the challenge with that is you have to then really make sure that you're going through each one, where you might totally miss the so-and-so is playing the guitar and it's not actually plugged in. You need to make sure that everything's up and working, but I don't know. A lot of people do like doing it that way. You might put drums up first, you've got drums sounding good, then you can add in guitar until it sort of sounds like they're balanced pretty well, then add in piano or the singers. But
One of the wild cards in this is that this is an acoustic piano, and you have no control over its volume.
yeah,
And so you almost have to use that as the anchor and work around it.
yeah, that's a very good point. Is because there's no volume control on the piano, if you turned up the rest of the instruments too loud, you might start to drown the piano out, or you could have the opposite. If your instruments are too quiet, then the piano's louder than everything else. So you have to sort of set everything else to then blend in with the piano. Luckily for this size of room, this is probably just about the right level anyway, so I don't think it needs to be amplified. It carries in the room pretty well, so you can just, but you have to pay attention that everything else still has to blend with the volume of the piano. You want to try now? Want to do one more song? Which one is which?
Just
Which one were you thinking of turning up?
Has to be another good movie.
Yeah, a little bit later, I started to hear Kayla a little bit more. It was good at the beginning, I think. He was leading, and you could hear well at that point. I thought the mix was actually pretty good there. You picked up quickly when Carolyn started singing quietly within the dark, which is good. Yeah, good work.
I knew I couldn't hear her, that's what Sean said.
I just feel like there's one too loud. Jeff has a loud voice.
Yeah.
So which might be different and a challenge because I might hear it, but another person might not hear.
Yeah.
What sucks is that Jeff has a big voice.
That's why Jeff was the lowest.
Yeah, he has a strong voice.
PG's like this and that much higher.
Yeah, when Jeff sings, he has a strong voice, so it comes through pretty strong.
Yeah, you should hear him when he's just like playing around in the car. It's so loud, and he's like screams. Because we were driving home from camp this weekend, last weekend, the weekend that just passed, and we were, Campbell, who just left, was playing music in the car, and he put on "Have You Heard of Trouble" by Taylor Swift. Yes, and as soon as I did that, he told Campbell before it happened, he told Johnny to sing it, and Johnny's like, "I'm not doing it." As soon as it happened, Jeff screamed. I'm like, "Oh my gosh!"
When did I scream?
When we were singing "Trouble" in Campbell's car.
Oh, yeah.
How are we doing? Are we good?
I think we're pretty good. That sounds really good.
So one thing that I will say from the front team part is that we need to get better at telling you guys who's doing the lead, because even in that song, I switch from a low harmony to a high harmony, and sometimes if we don't have enough practice time, we just make it up as we go along, which is really hard for you guys. So we're determined to kind of let you guys know, and we always give you an order of service. So you have every song, and what we can do is write whoever is leading their name beside that song, and then you'll know that they need to be the strongest, because between myself and Jeff and Tim and Catherine when she's here, we switch around a lot, even with the same service. Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So we will need to get better at that, and that will help you guys to do your job, because then we'll actually be working together as a team.
Can we do a little quiz?
Yeah.
What I'd like, if we could be singing a song, Carolyn, and if in the middle of the song, could you do an impromptu speaking direction to the congregation or whatever? So I was talking about that before. Suddenly her volume was going to be way lower than when she was singing, and yet we need to hear it. So I don't know, a little song and be inspired to.
All right. If you like yell at the congregation. Lord Jesus, thank you for today.
So just sing a bit of a chorus in this one. I'm no longer a slave to sin. I am a child of God. No, I'm no longer
for the stuff like speaking, but even like as they change who's leading the song, sometimes if they have guitar might do like a special part.
Sound system.
We're not gonna leave you alone the first time, don't worry.
Oh, you're doing great.
No, this is the first time I even touched one.
There you go. Congratulations.
Ben left me alone to do it. He said that he's like, I'm gonna teach you. So I sat down and did it. And as soon as I got the hang of it, he just went and got up and left.
Mr. Rob is going to be around most of the time, and especially for those of you who are just getting the training first time today, we're not going to leave you alone the first couple of weeks.
I can do it now,
But yeah, and I mean, some of you have more experience too. One thing I wanted to tell you guys specifically about this, we're changing a little bit in that I need you guys to come, we're asking everyone to come a little bit earlier. So normally we practice at 10, and what happens is everyone arrives at 10, and we don't actually start practicing until like 10:15, and then the service is at 11, so we're scrambling. So for all of you guys who are volunteering, so Johnny and Andrew and EJ and whoever else is coming, we need you guys to be here at 9:30, because part of your job with the soundboard is to help us set up the microphones. So when I come in to lead, normally I turn everything on and I set up the microphones, but you guys know that I'm going to be on leave, and so some people are less familiar with our system. So we're going to work together. So on a Sunday morning, if you're coming here to do the soundboard, you need to be here at 9:30. The worship leader will be here at 9:30 and they'll say, hey, it's me and someone else and this instrument. You guys can work up and set up the microphones, do your sound checks, that by 10 o'clock, practice is actually starting, okay? I'm going to train you on easy worship as well, and that's the same thing. You come in at 9:30, you'll have the service order, and I'm going to teach you guys how to actually put the songs in so that it's created. So not one person is going to do all of that, it's we're all going to work together as a team, okay? That also means that when you volunteer on a Sunday, you can get like 3 hours of your community service done. And we have a logbook that I'll have you guys sign in on. So 9:30 to 12:30, which means you're coming in, you're setting everything up, you're here for the entire practice, you're here for the entire service, and you're shutting everything down. And that will probably take about 3 hours. So it's quite a commitment. That's why we're not asking you to come every single week. We're going to share it around. But we really appreciate you guys being part of this. So before I go into well, first of all, is there anything else that you wanted to go over?
I think that covers about everything. You guys are welcome to look. You can have me on Facebook or something too if you have questions at some point. Shoot me questions, take a picture of the board and say, what does this do? Yeah, I'm happy to answer
One question is just about your personal preference. And,
Yeah.
so if we've got 5, 6 channels that are running on a Sunday, is your inclination to kill everything that isn't being used, or do you like to leave them up a wee bit? What's your personal preference?
Most of the time I tend, like if they're moving into the sermon, then I'll probably turn all of the instrument microphones and the singer's microphones down. That way you're only getting the pastor microphone, you're not getting anything else, just to add extra unneeded noise in the system. What I would say though is if say you're speaking and the singers are still on stage, I might leave like the lead singer vocal up a little bit just in case you want to say something and add in. Maybe not all the way, but just enough that if she speaks, I'll notice it right away.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but so until you know for certain that there's only one person speaking,
Yeah.
you leave.
So until it's just the pastor, I'd still leave the others up kind of a little bit, so they're kind of ready to go just in case. Maybe not all the way, but at least so that if they say something, they'll
If
be
you're looking down and they start talking, you're going to hear it and you're going to respond quickly.
Yeah.
But if it's down entirely,
It's down entirely.
They may
You
be
might
up
not
in the
notice it
back
for a
one.
second. If you're looking at your phone and they're doing this at stage, yeah. Actually, when I'm working at the hotels, like right now I'm working at a hotel, so I run all the conferences. One occasion where I do something similar is sometimes they'll do question and answer with the audience. You wouldn't have that here, but in that case they have 2 wireless handheld microphones, and usually there's 2 people who take them to people in the audience. I can't really see where they're going half the time, and if someone starts asking a question and I have the mic all the way down, I won't even have the question start. So in that case, I'll leave it up like maybe halfway. That way they don't make a lot of noise if they're fumbling with the microphone, but that way if they start asking a question, I can at least hear it. And I go to someone's trying to ask a question, so then I can turn them up. So it's the same idea. You want to have it up just enough that you can hear if they start to do something.
Okay, well, what we will do then, Andrew, I need you to add your name and your phone number. So there are 3 other people that were not able to be here today because of work and stuff, so just give the best phone number to reach you, whether it's your mom's or house phone or whatever. I'm working on a schedule, and I will put 2 of you, and hopefully Mr. Rob, whenever he's here.
How my last name?
Sure.
I didn't want my last name because I figured
That's
they
okay.
should know who
I
each
know
is.
you are. The others may not. So every week, I have a schedule like this for who's leading every week, and I'm gonna add in your names here. And I will give you guys each a schedule, and I will also post it here. So the most important thing for you guys to remember is that if you cannot come when you are scheduled, it's your responsibility to find someone else. So everyone will get a copy of this list with your phone numbers. And so if EJ, you're scheduled and you can't come, you might call Johnny and say, hey, can you fill in for me? But you need to do that, okay? So I will leave a copy here in the sound booth, and you will each get a copy once I put your names in. And you'll all get a copy with your names and phone numbers. There, as I said, there are 3 other people, Amanda, Alicia, and Jack, who are not able to be here today. So we recorded it, and we'll pass it on to them.
Who's Jack?
Jack Rance,
Yeah,
Jack's about 65 years old,
sits up
Big
there,
guy,
walks
cane.
with a cane.
great guy.
Yeah, he does have some experience working with the soundboard, so,
I only said hi to him once.
oh, okay, yeah. So also, you guys, are you okay with learning both?
Yeah.
Some of you already know both, and that's fine. And I think, is Anissa coming this morning still? She's not. Okay, that's all right. Some of the other girls already have practiced with Easy Worship. So I will try to indicate what your responsibilities are for that Sunday. So just when you call someone to replace you, make sure they actually know how to do what you're replacing yourself for. Okay? All right. Are we good with that? You guys want a donut break? Grab a donut before we
Yes.
finish.
Donut break. Camel
Okay,
doodle,
now we'll do the Easy Worship.
She just sent a message saying Deb didn't come back, so I guess that's never saw.
I knew it was 5.9, and I know too, from the last book.
Okay, I don't know if you've got enough time to do that, but it's, give it a try. Just get there, see what's up, send me a text, tell me whether you're fine, and I'll tell you whether there's any point in applying here.
Well, we paused the camera there.
Oh, yes. That's right. Josh, I really appreciate you coming and thank you for sharing your wisdom. It's good for them to have practice. Sing together, we bless you, Creator.
Provider, we bless you.
So